Welcome to College Basketball Net Profit Pub Sports Radio, Thursday, November 17th. Ian Cameron, Conor, Mac, we are back and ready to break down the Thursday college basketball card. Great job by Dabby Cab the last couple days, filling in the last 2 days. Great show with you and Dabby and Conor the last 2 days. Thursday card on tap tonight. Lots of neutral court in the environments tonight, something you want to be aware of when you're handicapping these games. Let's get right to it. We've got a big slate. We'll, as always, start with a bunch of marquee games that we have circled, and we'll start in the Big Apple, Nebraska, St. John's. We've got St. John's here, about a 10-point home favorite in this game. The total currently sitting at 160 and a half. And we've seen this total go up from 157 and a half. I agree. I mean, I jumped on the over right away. I figured this was going to go up. You know, this early in the season, you start to catch on to betting patterns. And you start to catch on to situations where, okay, this team is going to get bet. The money's going to come in on this team. Oh, the money is going to come in on this total. And you already early in the season, even though it's only been a week, you start to get a sense of where the betting markets are going. And they seem to be repeatedly betting a lot of the same teams, a lot of the same totals. And St. John's overs have been bet up every game, and it's hard to disagree with it. I mean, they play extremely fast. They're a good offensive team. They absolutely can score the basketball. That has never been a problem for this squad the last couple of years. Defensively, though, there have been issues in the past for St. John's. And we've seen in their first few games this year, 97 points, 83, 91, shooting a high percentage. All three games go over the total. Nebraska, on the other hand, they have played a couple of games, and they have scored into the high 70s in both games, shooting pretty well in both games. Keep in mind the last game they played stayed under the total against Omaha. But if you've been watching that Nebraska-Omaha team that's really started to slow down the pace a lot more. Crutchfield, their new coach, and he's really implemented a more half-court defensive style this year with Omaha, and that pretty much dragged the pace down a lot in that game. So you got two teams that are going to want to get out and run, two teams that I think are better scoring than stopping you at the defensive end of the basketball court. So I totally agree with the move up. Should be a lot of points here. Conor, what do you think?
Yeah, shout out to the chat. I'll hit them up here in just a few minutes. We get a little more peeps trickling in. Yeah, I agree with you. Even at this number, Ian, I think it can get over. I know it's not the best now, but Nebraska, up and down, we've known that for the last few years. St. John's, the better basketball team. I worry about Nebraska, not at home, but I think 10 might be too much. I just don't know if I could trust Nebraska with the points. I want it. I lean that way all day. I've been looking at it. So I think there's a bunch of points in there, and I think Nebraska could slip in and cover this number. Both teams, not much defense, pace everywhere. There should just be tons of buckets and not much defense. So I think it still gets over. Even if 160, I think it can get over here. And, man, I'm leaning Nebraska in the 10. They've just disappointed me, the last few years at times on the road. So it's just a lean right now.
Yeah, AJ Storr, David Jones, this North Dakota State transfer, Sam Greasy Greasel, as I like to call him here for St. John's. He's played pretty well, too, offensively. And like I say, they've got a bunch of scores. They got inside-outside scoring balance, which you like to see. And, again, you've got Anderson on one side, and you got Freddie Hoiberg on the other side, two coaches that implement up-tempo. So, yeah, absolutely. You should see a lot of points here between Nebraska and St. John's tonight. All right, Wichita State and Richmond. Next up here, we've got Richmond 4.5, 5-point home favorites here, 132 being the total in this game. I like the Shockers a little bit, catching the points. I'm not overly – I don't want to say I'm not impressed with Richmond. I just didn't I expected them to maybe take a little step back this year, and I don't know how much you want to read into their first few games. I mean, they played Northern Iowa and Charleston are not bad teams, and they beat Northern Iowa as 6-point favorites. Charleston, 2.5-point dogs they were. They lost in overtime, 92-90, just a few nights ago. They beat VMI by 21 in their first game. Wichita State, on the other end, been a little bit of an up-and-down start for them. They crushed Central Arkansas 79-55, losing to Alcorn State in their last game 66-57. Just one of those games where they just could not make a basket. And look, that was a problem at times last year as well for Wichita State as well. I just think now we are getting a little bit of a buy low situation here with Wichita State. I think in terms of the matchup here, the one thing they could do is maybe steal off the paint just a little bit here against Richmond. I mean, offensively, we know Wichita State still has their issues, still has their deficiencies. There's no question about that. But I think when you look at this matchup here for Richmond going into this game, you've got a Wichita State team that defensively is still pretty solid when it's all said and done. Richmond so far this year, too, a concern is the glass. As I mentioned, Wichita's got some size, and Wichita, in terms of rebounds per game and crashing the boards, their rebounding numbers and their rebounding margin is pretty good. It's not so good for Richmond. So I think that's one of those scenarios where Wichita State might be able to get those second and third chance possessions this tonight. And that's important because they're not a good shooting team. So if you're going to expect offense from them, you'd better damn sure get some offensive rebounds. And their offensive rebounding numbers are good. And Richmond's defensive rebounding numbers are horrendous if you look at the first few games. So that's why I think if they get those extra possessions, they use some of that size to their advantage, it's going to be difficult, I think, for Richmond to have the possessions and the ability, to cover and extend this margin. So, and you've got them off an embarrassing loss, and I think that will have Wichita State focused here. So I do like the points here with the Shockers in this one, and I'm not sold on Richmond. What do you think here, Conor Mack, Wichita State, Richmond?
Yeah, I think this should be a good game. The Richmond side, before the last game where they just got their ass blown out early to Charleston, we're down like 20, came back. And we know Charleston just up and down. But I was pretty impressed by those first two games, 68-55 and 69-48 by Richmond. Northern Iowa, some basketball, these teams pretty good over the past few years, kind of dominated them. We know Wichita, this team can't score. It lost a good amount from last year. I'm on the under here. I just don't see him scoring a ton of points. I think Richmond gets back into the first few games, unlike that last one with Charleston. I need more points with Wichita. I got to see him score a little bit more. They don't have the shooters, but they're gritty, and I think they're good defensively. And other than that, Richmond, those first few games, I think they're decent on defense. You mentioned their trouble on the glass, but I think this game will be gritty and in the 60s. So I'm on the under 133 and lean to the points, but I can't take Wichita right now.
All right, Central Michigan and Minnesota. Next up here, we've got Minnesota currently around 11-point home favorites in this, actually down to 10.5 in some spots, 135 the total in this game. Gophers 2-1 to start the year. But, the first game was against Western Michigan, 9-point home favorites, 61-60, escaped by the skin of their teeth. They play St. Francis of New York. In the next game, 72-54. That game was bouncing around, 10, 12, 14-point lead for Minnesota much of the game. And then they just pulled away late, got the cover there. And then, of course, they got absolutely ambushed by DePaul, 69-53. I'm kind of mad at myself because I did say, I did mention on the last time I think I was on when they played each other, DePaul, Minnesota, it was on Monday. I said I took a small shot with Minnesota, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've been fading Minnesota these first couple of games. We jumped on them, and then they get blitzed. So now you can consider me back on the no-no list here for Minnesota. I'm not looking to lay 10.5 here with them in this game. Now, from a Central Michigan standpoint, they played just the one game so far this year, 76-60, win and cover in that game against Eastern Illinois, who are just brutal offensively. So I don't know if you want to read too much into the way Central played in that game. As far as what we're going to get here from pace-wise from Central Michigan, we know the last few years they played pretty fast. It's a team that we don't really trust at the defensive end of the floor. That has been a shortcoming, to say the least, for Central Michigan. They're 35th this year already in tempo and possessions per game. They are bad really at both ends of the floor. I mean, their offense right now has not been off to the greatest of starts, although they only have the one game to show for it. And their defense still, like I said, last year it was pathetic. I would certainly lean to an over here in this game a little bit. I mean, you're talking about this total only being 135 now and bet down because of Minnesota and what we've seen from them offensively. And obviously, when you flip it around to the Gophers and the way they want to play, they do not want to push the ball up and down the floor. They play very slow. So I understand it's a bit of a pace war here, clash of styles, if you will. But because I lean Central Michigan, I do lean over because, look, if they're going to get their preferred style of play, it's going to be more of an up and down basketball game tonight between these two teams. I prefer the side more than the total. Like the over is going to be a small play for me. The bigger bet's the Central Michigan side plus 10.5. Like I said, I definitely worry about Minnesota laying this kind of number, and Central does have some offensive upside to them, and that could mean the back door is open, even if the Chippewas are behind for a large portion of this game, which may not even be the case. Because let's not forget, they just barely survived Western Michigan, another MAC team, Minnesota, in their first game this year. So I like the underdog here and a smaller lean to the over. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, that's got to make you think, just barely beating Western. Because this Central Michigan team last year, I was going through everything, sucked. They were horrible. So that's the only thing that gave me pause. They're not very good. They're not very good defensively. What did they give up that first game? 97 or something to Marquette. You mentioned the pace difference in this game. This total has been hit down. I think Minnesota will slow it down. So it's already come down 3 points. I'm going to stay off there. But I agree with you. If I had a free bet, and there's just no way until further notice, I'm going to lay it with Minnesota. I'd take the 10.5 with Central here.
Yeah,
Minnesota, that game I watched, Ian, real quick with DePaul, couldn't make anything.
No.
Just brick city, just ice cold. Maybe a little bit they score tonight because the Central team doesn't play a ton of defense, but yeah, I couldn't take it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Minnesota's got offensive issues. That being said, Central Michigan's D might be what ails them. And Minnesota did shoot the 3-point shot pretty good so far in their first few games, and that's where the Central Michigan team struggles a little bit defensively. What also concerns me about Minnesota, and we always say this about any team that's favored, but especially a team that's favored by double digits like Minnesota is, you got to make your free throws. You got to be good from the charity stripe. I mean, those are gimmies. Those are supposed to be automatic. Free points when you get free throws. They are 53.8% from the free throw line this year, Minnesota. That's 353rd out of, and there's 363 teams in Division I college basketball this year. 363. They're 353 in free throw percentage this year. And you got to lay 10.5 with them. So, again, that's something you got to be worried about, too, taking Minnesota here with the lack of ability to make your bunnies, make your free throws. That's definitely something you would be a little bit worried about, no question. All right, next up, we've got Utah Tech taking on Arizona. Now, don't be fooled. Utah Tech is not a new team to Division I college basketball. This used to be Dixie State. They actually renamed this team to Utah Tech for some reason, but that's who they used to be. They were Dixie State last year, but now they're Utah Tech. They're taking on Arizona here tonight. Arizona Wildcats laying a huge number, 28 in this game, 163.5 being the total in this game. Certainly, this is another one where, look, it's that you're seeing in full display right now, on full display, the perils of doing a show at late afternoon, the day of the games, because all these, so many of these lines have moved. So many of the best numbers have gone, but I definitely like the over. I still like it, believe it or not. I think even at 164, you can bet it, even getting those even getting a shitty number, getting the worst of it right now, because this Arizona team could probably go for 100 tonight, honestly, against this Utah Tech team. Utah Tech, not a good defensive team. That's putting it mildly. I mean, they have a perimeter advantage. They have an inside size and length advantage. I mean, it just should be easy buckets around the rim. They've got good perimeter shooters. They've got a complete offensive team. Once again, Arizona under Tommy Lloyd continues to do a great job. The Mark Few disciple, and because he's a Mark Few disciple, came from Gonzaga prior to taking over last year at Arizona. They play fast, one of the fastest paced teams in the country. And Arizona's put up a bushel full of points early on this year, 117 against Nicholls State. That was a fast-paced game. And Southern, in their last game, 95 points. And to be quite honest with you, they took it easy on Southern. They kind of called off the dogs there in that game. Utah Tech is a 38th ranked team tempo-wise in the country. Arizona 12th. So you're talking about up and down the floor. That's exactly what you're going to see here in this game. So for me, rather than a side, because you just don't know Arizona, do they take it easy if they're up by 30? That's what makes it tough to lay these big points. But I'm just sticking with the over here. Utah Tech's good enough to contribute, I'd say 50 or so. And I think you're absolutely going to get, or even 60, because of just how many possessions there are going to be. And you could get easily a 90 to 100 spot here out of Arizona, and I think it can get into the high 160s at least in terms of the total in this game. What do you think here, Conor Mack, Utah Tech, Arizona?
Yeah, I agree with you here. I mean, Arizona's team total is like 95 or 96. I was looking at today.
Yeah, almost
They
100.
should get there. Yeah, it's even creeping more. they scored 117 already. If teams like Washington and these teams and Nevada score 81, 78, you mentioned, I gotta think Arizona gets close to 100. As long as you mention that last 6 or 7 minutes, though, could be kind of big, when you're playing such a big number like this. But I gotta think they get near there. And I think Arizona's played so fast that even a team like this might score 70. So I agree with you here. I don't know about laying it, but I think there's a ton of points. Their team total could get there, but I think it gets over too.
All right, so we both think a lot of points coming in that game. Speaking of a lot of points in that game, it's a great segue to the next game. Davidson taking on Charleston. We've got the Charleston team 3.5-point favorites here in this one. 166 is the total now. And here's another example of, unfortunately, we're not getting the best of the number anymore, but total steamed up from 158.5 to 166. And believe it or not, it's still may not be high enough, because this Charleston team, and I've just been riding their overs. I think I've talked about them now a few times that I've been on the Net Profit show here in the first week of the season through their first 3 games. I mean, they flew over the total. You had 163 against Chattanooga, 188 against North Carolina, 182 against Richmond. This team is just up and down the floor. So to me, I look at this as a situation where, 3-0 to the over. I'm riding it again. Now, I did bet it at a better number. I think when I got in on it this morning, it was 160. I didn't even get the best number. I got 163, and it opened 158.5. But even 163 is better than what we got right now, which is 166 to 166.5. But no, I agree with it fully. You're going to see a lot of points. We know how good this Davidson team is offensively. Every single year, they just execute everything. They share the ball. They pass up a good shot to get a better shot. I mean, anyone that watches college basketball knows what we get from Davidson year in and year out. It's just such pristine, such terrific offensive execution every single season. The head coach is just the son of the retired Bob McKillop, who, of course, was the head coach here forever. It's his son, Matt, now the head coach. Basically the exact same system. So no changes whatsoever. It's still a terrific offensive team. Davidson, they should have their way against Charleston, but at the same time, the Charleston pace should be able to do some damage. And as always with Davidson, we worry about them defensively a little bit. Look at these last 2 games. They give up 97 points to Wright State, and they give up 71 to VMI. The Keydets in their last game, they were 21.5-point favorites. They won by 4. So still those same old defensive, worries for Davidson. So points, and more points is what I like here in this one. What do you think, C-Mac?
Yeah, I mean, this is just gone way up. This could go, already 7 or 8 points. And it just, does it get there in the end? I think so. I mean, even
what's
now,
shocking too? Not even any buyback. Like it hasn't even come down at all.
Well, you mentioned, because Davidson, tons of scores everywhere. So does Charleston. Both these teams can light it up. Not a ton of defense. Charleston extremely just up and down. They've been really good at home against a number. I was seeing if this pushed more. I'm liking, this went to 3.5, 4, because I was going to look the other way now at Davidson if I could get 4 maybe. That game was close the other night. Obviously, they let them back in at that 92-90 win over Richmond. So I think Davidson has the scores to keep this game tight. I think it's a good one, and there's plenty of points. So sit back, get your popcorn, and watch it.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, Charleston. This is the Charleston Classic. This is a quote unquote neutral court tournament, but this will be like a home game for Charleston. This is their home court here for this game. So it is pretty much, this is the one time you can say it's legitimately a home game here for Charleston, even though it's a quote unquote neutral court tournament here with the Charleston Classic. But you're right. I think it's gotten carried away because I've got this number close to a pick 'em. In fact, I actually look at power ratings and Bart Torvik's site and Ken Palm's site. They've got this closer to pick 'em. And now we're talking about Charleston 3.5. I get it, the home court edge, but I think this is closer to me leaning Davidson at the current number now than Charleston with the current number. All right, next up we've got, as we continue along here, hit the like button, by the way. We appreciate it. We've got 95 live viewers and counting. Hit that like button. We sure appreciate that. Loyola, Chicago, and Tulsa next up here. This, again, neutral court tournament. This is the Myrtle Beach Invitational first-round matchup taking place Conway, South Kakalaki. So it's Coastal Carolina's home gym that's being used for this tournament. But it's Loyola, Chicago, Tulsa here. Loyola, Chicago, 7.5-point road favorites, 140.5 the total in this game. It's we should create a sound effect, for the games like this, Conor Mac, where da 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 the Star Wars music, except it's Pace Wars. That's what this is, Pace Wars, because Tulsa is actually playing a lot faster this year because obviously there's a change in head coach for this Tulsa Golden Hurricane team coming into this season. It's no longer Frank Haith at the controls here of this Tulsa basketball team. It's Eric Conkle who's taken over for in his first season here as head coach, and he's brought a little more up-tempo, full court, push the basketball type of style here with Tulsa. Meanwhile, you know what you're going to get from Loyola Chicago. They were like this under Porter Moser. It's been the same under Drew Valentine, the head coach here for Loyola since he's taken over. Slow it down, half court, rely on an excellent defense. That's usually what you're going to get from the Ramblers going into this game. And the question is going to be, is that Tulsa team offensively, are they going to be able to solve that defense is going to be the big question here in this game. I do think there's a bit of a gap between these two teams, and certainly it's evidenced by the point spread with Loyola Chicago laying 7 here on a neutral court. I think it's warranted. I think this is obviously going to be a team that's going to be in contention to win their conference. Tulsa's kind of a middle of the pack team. We saw them lose their opening game of the season against Oregon State 73-70, 85-79. They didn't cover in their second matchup either against Jackson State. So a lot of issues with Tulsa, especially defensively. They flew over the total in those two games. Now they got to play Loyola Chicago and this really good defensive team, and could be a little bit of a struggle for them here tonight trying to score the basketball. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, I kind of lean to the Ramblers here a little bit, but stop short of taking them. You are asking them to lay 7.5 here on neutral court, but I haven't seen enough out of Tulsa to say, yeah, they're going to be able to hang here with one of the better defensive teams. And again, when you're pushing the ball like they are, and then you're being asked to execute in the half court, sometimes that can be a problem for teams in this kind of matchup situation. What do you think here, Conor?
You know what, though? It's so early on to really say anything, but Loyola, that defense hasn't been there these first few games.
Not so at times, yes.
Yeah. I think it'll get better. Too good at coaching as the year goes on in conference play. But yeah, Fairleigh Dickinson, all those points, it went to OT. One thing, Tulsa early on, not a ton of defense, but they could score. Simpson's pretty good. Griffin can put it in. If you could still get an 8, there's a lot of 7.5s. I know it's on a neutral floor. I take the 8 points with Tulsa, and I'm not crazy about them, but I think they can hang around if those, if Fairleigh Dickinson can. I think Tulsa could here, so I like the 8 or 7.5 of them.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out here in terms of that Tulsa offense. Will it be able to work here against this half-court team? I don't care about college basketball, but you guys rock, says Cheshire Cat. I love it, Cheshire Cat. Thank you. We appreciate that. That's amazing. You don't give 2 shits about college hoops, but hey, we're just so damn good on a show, Conor and I, that you're still donating $10 to the cause. We appreciate it.
Shout out.
Very much. Yeah. Cheshire Cat's here a lot. He watches everything. So appreciate it, my friend. Glad you're enjoying the show. We'll get you into college hoops. Come on. By the time March rolls around, that's when things really get going. Conference tournaments. Everybody's a college basketball fan at that time of the year. Yeah, early in the season can be tough to get into it because there's still football, hockey, other sports going on, NBA. But definitely once you get to the February, March part of the college basketball season, it's hard not to be a college basketball fan. All right, Pittsburgh and VCU next up here on the Thursday slate. This is one of the Legends Classic games taking place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. We've got VCU 3.5-point favorites here, 129 the total in this game. I mean, number to me looks a little short on VCU. I mean, I think they're a lot better than Pitt. I'm certainly not a big fan of what I've seen, I'm not a big fan of this Pitt team coming into the season. VCU, I'm telling you what, this coach of theirs, Mike Rhodes, has done a terrific job. I didn't think they were going to be as good last year, and they totally got me with that. They obviously had a terrific season overall. They're coming off a 63-59 loss yesterday to Arizona State, but now they play a Pitt team that I think's got even more question marks here coming into this game than Arizona State did. Pitt's still a team to me, supposed to be its team that struggles to score. They didn't show it against Tennessee Martin, but they have shown the struggles that I expected. coming into the season for Jeff Capel's team to consistently put the biscuit in the basket. 56 points in a 25-point blowout loss to West Virginia. They only shot 19 of 45 in that game. And then, of course, 91-60, a 31-point loss to Michigan. And they got blown out in that game, struggled to score in the game yesterday. And that's going to be the issue here, because one thing VCU can do, they can play defense. They haven't played defense nearly as, kind of like with Loyola Chicago, believe it or not, a second ago. Maybe not quite the level of defense we expect from the Rams in their first few games, but we know they're capable, and we know they're facing a team that just flat out scuffles to score points. I mean, 39% shooting, 316th in the country, Pitt, and 322 from the perimeter, 26.2% with their three-point shooting, the Pitt Panthers this year. This should be a match where VCU just gradually grinds this team down through the course of 40 minutes and ends up getting the win and cover. I like VCU here, -3.5. What do you think, C-Mac?
Oh, yeah. Let's hit up the chat. Shout out to the chat. Degenerate, what's up? Joey, Nasty Nate, Canes Nation. There's Davy Cabot, my man. T-Mac, Cash Action Bets. Jacqueline, J. Peasy, Rich Brown, Preston, Nunya, Rudval, Rodney Barton. Good to see you, my man, up in here. Don Play, Fowlish Hound. Shout out to everybody up in here. Tori Coker, what's going on? D Mills. Shout out to everybody. You know what? This has moved a little bit. VCU should win this game here. Those struggles in that second half were so bad last night. They couldn't hit a shot. That's the only little bit problem, is when they're laying a number is covering it. Now it starts reaching out. But they should win here. No. Pittsburgh's not very good. They can't score. They can't hit anything deep. Obviously, I'd lean under. This has got hit hard. It's down to 129. Still should be low scoring. But even 3.5, I'd lean VCU. They should beat Pitt here, I think, by 10. So I lean them, laying the 3.5.
And a big problem was why they scuffled so much second half. They needed a big shot. Their big shot maker was not around, Ace Baldwin. He didn't play last night, wrist injury, and that's definitely something you want to keep an eye. He's questionable. I'm hearing from the coach Rhodes that they expect he's got a better chance to play tonight. Even if he does, obviously, I think -3.5 is a steal if Ace Baldwin plays. But even if he doesn't, I mean, they don't need to be Picasso offensively tonight, because they've got a great defense, and Pitt just can't score. So VCU could only score 64 points. Like, if VCU hits 62 or 64 points, they can cover this number. I don't know if Pitt hits 60, honestly, in this game tonight. So, 64-57. That's kind of the score I have in mind tonight with these two teams. A win and cover for VCU, and probably the game stays under the total as well.
I know. I still think even at this number, I think it can stay under.
And, of course, neutral court. And this is Barclays Center. If we remember in years past, Conor, Mac, there's been a lot of conference tournaments in this building, especially the A10. And, man, it sometimes plays to unders, because it's just it's a weird setup there sometimes a little bit, especially the Boardwalk Hall. It's more so Boardwalk Hall than Barclays Center in terms of the bad optics for shooting. But still, I mean, we've seen a lot of – that's been more of an under venue for the A10 tournament, I know, the last few years. The Barclays Center. So it's another reason why you might want to lean under the total here, Pitt and VCU. And the other game in that venue tonight, the Barclays Center, the other Legends Classic matchup, Michigan and Arizona State. Michigan, 7.5-point favorites in Brooklyn. The total here, 142, pretty much across the board. Kind of like the Loyola Chicago game for me. I could only take Michigan. I think they're better than Arizona State, but at the same time, I have to give Arizona State credit against VCU, battling back last night against the Rams. That definitely impressed me. I definitely had Arizona State a bit on the go against list early in the season. Michigan got the job done emphatically against that horrible offensive Pitt. We just talked about them, 91-60. How about that game going over the total? Only because Michigan just lit up Pitt for 91 points in that game. It was just impressive to see what they did. They got balanced scoring from everybody. It wasn't the Hunter Dickinson show last night for Michigan. Kobe Buffkin steps up with 14 points. Jet Howard, 17 points. Joey Baker, 14 points for them as well. So nice to see them spread the wealth, share the basketball a little bit. It was definitely good to see that. Michigan needs more of that, because I find too many times they're reliant on the big man Hunter Dickinson. So to get a little bit of spreading the stats sheet, if you will, is a good sign for them moving forward. Keep in mind there's some injuries for Arizona State, including, of course, Marcus Bagley, who is just such an important part to this team. Marcus Bagley has missed the last 2 games due to injury, so we'll see if he's returning tonight. He's questionable here for Arizona State. Obviously, a big piece of that front court for the Sun Devils. But, you look at the way these two teams match up here. Again, I hate to be a broken record on this. Actually, both teams have kind of scuffled from the free throw line. That's concerning. But I think what the bigger concern here is Michigan's been shooting the 3-point, Arizona State has struggled to score the basketball this season, and Michigan's been pretty damn good defensively. So that's something you would be concerned about. Usually Bobby Hurley's team scoring isn't their issue. It's defending. It's kind of the reverse this year. Defensively, they haven't been that bad, but scoring at times has been an issue for Arizona State in the early part of the season. So that's probably why they've played to the under each of the last 2 games. The total here, 142 from a pace standpoint, obviously with Michigan under Juwan Howard. They play at a moderate tempo, like they're middle of the pack, 164 ranking in terms of tempo, but they've been very efficient offensively. Meanwhile, you look at Arizona State, obviously all these years under Bobby Hurley, they play usually above average pace and tempo. That's the case again. But this year, for the first time in a couple, they're ahead of the curve defensively, a little bit behind the curve offensively. And usually, like I said, for the Sun Devils, it's the other way around. So I don't know. I kind of lean to the under because of this being a neutral court game. It's kind of like the final championship game, if you will, of the Legends Classic as well, because these are the 2 teams that won last night, Michigan and Arizona State. Maybe it gets that kind of defensive intensity, especially if it's somewhat tight down the stretch. So lean to Michigan, lean to the under, but don't feel strongly about either of those. What do you think here, C-Mac?
Yeah, I don't either. I don't think I'm going to bet this one. Arizona State got the win. I think ECU they couldn't score. You meant all the trouble that they had with no Baldwin. I think Michigan could take care of business. I lean them laying here. I got to see more from Arizona State. You mentioned they've been better defensively. They can't score. They're not very well. I think Michigan just pushed the pace. They could get to the 80s here, cover this number. I lean them. I've thought about this one a lot. You mentioned Howard was good. That second half was big with Michigan. You mentioned Bufkin, Baker. It's good to see those guys fill up the bucket. So I lean them again here. I just don't love it at 8.
All right, lean to them. Just don't love it enough to pull. We're both in that boat with this game. Like we lean a couple of different ways, but we don't like it enough to bet them. And so it's just a good game to watch when it's all said and done. All right, there you go. Those are the marquee games. Believe it or not, I don't think C-Mac has as much left on the menu in terms of other games he was eyeing. But is there anything at all that you want to mention in terms of another game?
No, not really.
All right.
Just everyone hit up the games in the chat. I got some opinions. I didn't love it. Even though there's a shit ton of games, nothing really crazy about. We went through them already, the ones I was on.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, then here, as always with me, I've got a few more games on my docket for the Thursday card. Shocker with that. But yeah, I've got a few more. Let's run it. Unfortunately, I was going to give out the one that's already started, and it's off to a good start. I really did like Colorado State at a pick 'em against South Kakalaki in this game that's already underway at 5 p.m. Eastern tip in the Charleston Classic. 20s. By the way, what a tough beat I had. I took Furman plus the points against Penn State. They come all the way back, and then they fall short at the end. What a tease that was. I had Furman plus the points there. The Paladins in that game, and their furious rally falls short. But yeah, I liked Colorado State up +1. That one is already underway. In terms of what else I like tonight, I like Boise -5 against Charlotte. That's another one of the games taking place in the Myrtle Beach Invitational in Conway, South Kakalaki. I know Charlotte, obviously closer to home for them, but I don't think Charlotte's that great. And I think Boise State's defense is going to make it really tough on them to score. I'd probably lean to the under in that game, but the betting markets are onto that already. 135 down to 131 with that total. But I agree with it. I think it's a low-scoring game, and I think Boise wins by like 7 or 8. So I like the -5 as well with Boise in that game. What else do we have here? Marshall, Miami, Ohio. I kind of like the over there. I'm always interested in those Marshall games over the total. I'm on Towson at a near pick'em. I got minus 110 money line. Towson against NC Greensboro. I think it's moving in the right direction there. Towson's a really good defensive team. Pat Scarry, the coach there, and that defense is scary. They can really defend. Just ask UMass. I mean, they absolutely embarrassed UMass, and that was a little bit surprised by that. But they played very well in that game defensively, and I think they've just got the defense here to contain Greensboro, which to me can struggle and go in scoring droughts. So I like Towson there, -2, a short road favorite now. I think Towson gets the job done there in that game against Greensboro. What else have we got? A couple of overs. I like North Dakota State, Indiana State over the total, and I like North Dakota Elon over the total. Elon is one of those teams that is trying to increase their tempo this year a little bit. We'll see if it plays out. Elon is not known to be a great offensive team, but early in the season, you're probably going to get value in terms of their totals. So I like that North Dakota Elon over at 146.5. Looks to be the best number right now with that. I was looking at TCU. I think TCU is going to be a really good team this year, and they're laying 17, but they've got some injuries, and that kept me off it. A lot of injuries right now for the Horned Frogs and that game against Monroe. I thought they had a chance to roll, but the injuries are going to keep me off that game. I was interested in laying the points, but I'm not going to anymore. I kind of like Portland a little bit, -4 against Air Force. Come back to the well. They had a tough spot there against Kent State the other night, but I think they're capable of bouncing back. I think Montana is a short number against St. Thomas. Montana Grizzlies on that home court of theirs, laying only 5.5. I do like the Grizzlies there.
You like them there? Game. Let's talk about that one real quick.
Yeah,
sure. Montana has struggled early on. Where last year in some of those early games where they played better teams, they were good. Yeah. That game I looked at that game a ton. I wish I was getting a couple more, but I kind of lean St. Thomas. Maybe you're right. Montana gets home here and takes care of it. But the struggles have been ugly those first two games. So yes, that one's interesting to me.
I think it's a get well spot because I don't think much of St. Thomas. I really don't. And I think Montana coming back home, they are going to be able to get the job done there. All right, so that's the main board pretty much. I kind of lean Cal Baptist plus the points against Washington too. I'm never fond of laying 8-9 with Washington, the Huskies, against Cal Baptist. So I'd lean to the underdog there a little bit. And then the rest of the games I like are the added board, the extra board. I'm on Norfolk State. Nunez on to me. Absolutely. 1,000% right. Let's get that up on the screen there. Yeah. Norfolk -8 versus Monmouth. It's fade Monmouth all day, every day. I mean, Monmouth is brutal. I mean, they are completely rebuilding this team. They have just been pulverized. Not totally non-competitive. Like 0-3 straight up, 0-3 against the spread, and they've just been absolutely crushed. 79-52 by Seton Hall, and Seton Hall wasn't even at full strength. 89-42 lost at Virginia. They get doubled in that game, and then 103-65 at Illinois the other night. And I mentioned in Illinois laying the points on Monday on the show. They're absolutely terrible, Monmouth. And actually, the money's come in on Norfolk State. And yeah, this is not obviously the a team that's the caliber of Illinois or Virginia or even Seton Hall, Norfolk State, but they were still expected to be a pretty solid team this year coming into it. They got romped by UCLA. Baylor, they were pretty competitive, though, in defeat. They lost 87-70. Not a bad showing. They were only down by 8, at halftime against Baylor in that game. So, Norfolk State's got Joe Bryant Jr. He's a really good scorer. Certainly, they're not stopping anybody right now, Monmouth. So, for me, it's just fade Monmouth until, it stops cashing for me. Like they're 0-3 against the spread. They've not even been close to the point spread in any game. So, I'm laying 8 there with Norfolk State against Monmouth in that game. 8.5, up from 5.5. Someone mentioned Bryant. I think it was Bill McDonald. Bryant versus Florida Atlantic. Bryant in the over. I like Bryant and the over in that game. Bryant plus the points is worth a look. I like that offense. They go up and down the court. They can backdoor you because they can score the ball so well. And obviously, I think a lot of their games fly over the total. And I think this one will do the same. And keep in mind, Bryant, extremely fast-paced in terms of tempo, one of the tops in the country, 5th in the country in terms of tempo. I mean, they are lightning fast. They try to get the first shot they can find. Florida Atlantic is a better offensive team than a defensive team, and they are not a snail. when it comes to pace. So to me, that's Bryant plus the points, and I like the over, which has also been bet up from 157 to 161.5. So I'm on both the side and the total there.
Cool. I like it.
I think that's it. Let me just double check my list here to see if I left anything out. Austin P getting 7.5 from 8 from St. Joseph's. I think they could hang in that number. I'm not a big fan of St. Joe's and what I've seen so far. So I think Austin P, the Governors of Austin P, getting 8 points can be competitive in that game against St. Joseph's. A couple more overs. Samford, Alabama, A&M.
South Florida. South Florida. Yeah. Austin
P. Oh, yeah, South Florida. My bad. I'm looking at Albany, St. Joseph's there. You have to right below it. Yeah, South Florida. Yeah, South Florida laying 7.5. With that team offensively, no, absolutely. I don't trust them to be able to do enough offensively in this kind of price range. And Austin P, like I said, they've been one of those middle-of-the-pack Ohio Valley teams the last few years, Austin P. But I think there's evidence that they could be competitive here tonight against South Florida simply because South Florida doesn't shoot straight half the time. So I think that's going to give Austin P an opportunity here to be competitive. 0-3 straight up, 1-2 against the spread for South Florida to begin the season. And I think the key here for South Florida, again, is their their offensive struggles. Yeah, you could say Austin P has struggled defensively so far this year, but I've seen evidence of teams like South Florida where even when they're facing a below average defensive team, they still have their issues. They still have their struggles scoring the basketball. And it also, when you look at this matchup too, you're talking about one of the worst, and I mean one of the worst. If you thought the Minnesota free throw shooting was bad, South Florida is even worse. South Florida is hitting 50.9% from the free throw line, 359th out of 363 teams in terms of free throw percentage. That is not what you want out of your 8-point favorite. Not even in the least do you want to see that. So, yeah, I like Austin P there. And that is it. And then, like I said, I like the Alabama A&M Samford over, LSU New Orleans, but that total's moved. Oh, I like Coppin State. Someone mentioned that. Coppin State's undervalued. I like this team. They came through for me the other night against the Naval Academy, Coppin State. That's a nice little basketball team. They can score points. They push the pace. I think they're starting to improve a little bit defensively. Juan Dixon, is a guy that played in the NBA for many years, been around the block. Now he's been the coach here, I think, for about 6 or 7 years at Coppin State. No, I like this team. I really do. And I think that's a short number for them tonight in that matchup against Tennessee Tech. I mean, nothing I've seen out of Tennessee Tech is all that spectacular so far. So even going on the road in that game, I think Coppin State minus the 4 can get it done.
Yes. Someone in the chat, the Butler. I kind of do. St. Francis, just defense is not there. Butler should still even score 80. So that could be a little tight. Just St. Francis gets in the 60s. It could get it over, but I lean it a little bit. I just didn't bet it.
Yeah, I think that one's a little tricky one. Yeah, Butler, You're right. With Butler, it's I think they're going to be pretty good with Mata there, but I'm still not ready to lay 20 with them necessarily.
Yeah.
How about the shocker that's going on at Myrtle Beach? I mean, Murray State was a 13-point underdog. They closed it against Texas A&M, and they are up by 10 with about 9 minutes to go in the second half. So really got Noli knows, of course. Noli knows any unders. We did mention them. I actually, you know what? As you know, I bet 90% of my bets are overs, as you know. But that doesn't mean I don't recommend unders. I think UMKC Kansas State is an under. I'll rhyme off a bunch of the games I think could go under. I think Wichita Richmond could go under. I think with the injuries to TCU, I think Monroe TCU could be an under. Northern Illinois Georgia Tech could be an under. That's the one I missed. How can you lay 12 with Georgia Tech? I mean, that team is not impressing me, and that team, I had them circled as a bet against team coming into the season. Josh Pastner, I think, is on the hot seat. He's never been someone that I thought, coach I really want to bet on and lay big points with, or an offense that I really want to lay big points with. I mean, the Georgia State game, they were fortunate to win that. They were down big early, and Georgia State went ice cold down the stretch. They won by 2. Give them credit, but this is not I trust the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets to win by a big margin. I just don't. And Northern Illinois, rather, 63-46 to Northwestern, but they did slip inside the number there. They're not great by any stretch of the imagination, the Huskies. And, them at the defensive end of the basketball court, still a little up and down. But Georgia Tech, is not one of those teams that we trust necessarily in terms of offense. And here's another team that's 66% from the free throw line, another team that doesn't make their free throws at a consistent enough clip, Georgia Tech. So I like the Northern Illinois side a little bit there. But, getting back to the other unders that I would recommend here, St. Thomas, Montana might be a decent under. What else do we see here? Boise, Charlotte, I mentioned that. That could be under the total as well. Pitt, VCU certainly screams out like an under to me. So, yeah, there are a few unders I like, Noli. I don't love betting them, but I'll recommend them.
Shout out to Noli. I'm already on it, my man. We talked about it earlier. I'm on the under there, Wichita. I like it.
Yeah, that's a good under. I agree with that. Hofstra -3. It's a tricky. The one thing about see what I like is I do think Hofstra's better than San Jose State. I do. I think they're a better basketball team right now at this point in time. I just don't like it when early in the season you're taking that first tough travel spot. You know what I mean? You're going from Hempstead, New York. That's where Hofstra University is, and you're going all the way to San Jose to the West Coast. I just don't love the travel spot here necessarily for Hofstra.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that would concern me a little bit here. In terms of laying the 2.5, 3. But to me, the number does look a little bit low. Hofstra, to me, is the better of those two teams. So the lean is to Hofstra, Bill, but I did not pull the trigger.
Yeah, I didn't either. Tricky. I think Hofstra is better, but going out there, I want to see more of San Jose, too, a little bit. And they're at home. Yeah, just tricky. San Jose could win that tonight, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tricky spot. They have been good. I mean, both, and even San Jose, we got to give them a little credit. 3-0. The difference is with San Jose, they played nobody essentially.
Yeah.
Georgia Southern's not great, and then they played a bunch of also-rans in the last two games. Whereas at least Hofstra, you played Iona, who's going to be one of the top teams in the Metro Atlantic again with Rick Pitino there. Princeton's a solid Ivy League team. George Washington's, okay. At least Hofstra, they cut their teeth basically on some tough competition. They've gone over the total. Like I say, Hofstra's not a team I'm looking to bet unders with. And, their offense is really good. Their defense is still a little shaky. They play above average tempo. But the problem is you're going to get a real slow down snail pace out of San Jose State. They do not play fast whatsoever. So keep that in mind. Merrimack, I would lean to Merrimack plus the points and the under in that game. There's another under I would lean with. Merrimack against Troy. In that one, and the total's already been bet down. I would agree with that. Merrimack plays a snail pace, and they're pretty solid defensively, so it's the perfect combination for an under.
I agree. One of my favorite teams to look at the under there, so I like it.
There you go. I think we've got pretty much. I think. Oh, any thoughts on Boston U from Tease? We got to answer Tease. Tease is one of our guys. Great time in San Antonio. He was there, of course, earlier this year with all of us. Boston U. First half, -7.5 in that one. Boston U is a team that I like what I'm seeing out of them. Pretty solid at the offensive end. I think they got a chance to take care of business there against Hartford. Really looks like they're in tough. Hartford's had some nice seasons before the Hartford Hawks. This doesn't look like one of them to me. They've had a rough start to the year, 1-2. The only win was against some school I've never even heard, Linden State, 85-43. 6.5-point dogs against Sacred Heart. They lose by 7. 10-point dogs in their last game at St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and they get absolutely destroyed by 24. So, yeah, Hartford's on the no-bet list for me. So, it's by default, it's Boston or nothing in that game. And there's a chance with what I've seen out of St. Francis, PA, Boston might be able to roll them.
Yeah, I agree with you. You mentioned it, this Hartford team. There's been some good ones in the past, but early on, they look like a fade. So I like it, Tease. I like the 7.5 first half.
Yeah, I already mentioned Coppin State knows something that I do like them -4 against Tennessee Tech. And no, I've not been to Hempstead, New York. I know that's where Hofstra is, but I've not been there. Maybe one day. You never know. We'll find our trails going toward Hempstead, New York. You never know. All right. That's about it. I think we got through all the questions. I think we hit almost every game now anyway, but after all those Q&As. So let's wrap it up. We've got best bets coming up from Conor and I. Hit the like button. Make sure you do that. We appreciate it. Best bets from Conor and I coming up next. First, though, we'll hear from Manscaped and Southtown 101. All right, Southtown 101. When you're in San Antonio, Texas, stop in. Great food, drinks, live music, DJs, and karaoke. Southtown 101 and manscaped.com. Promo code PubSports, 20% off your purchase. Lawnmower 4.0 or any Manscaped product, 20% off using the promo code PubSports. All right, it is best bet time to wrap it up for this edition of College Basketball Net Profit. I believe Charleston over was the winner I had on as the best bet the last time I was on. I do like the Charleston over again tonight, but we'll use something different tonight for best bet. But Conor, Mac, we'll start with you. What do you like for best bet?
Yeah, I'll give a couple here. Obviously, the Wichita under 133, and I took Tulsa +8. I think you're fine at 7.5. I think they can hang around with Loyola Chicago. I think they get better, but they don't have the defense. So take the 7.5, Tulsa.
There you go, Tulsa taking the points with the Golden Hurricane against Loyola Chicago. Best bet for Conor Mack. Yeah, there's a couple of instances. It's not just Hartford. There's Manhattan, too. Masiello bailed. The assistants took off and, just left the team just days before the season started. So there's a couple of these teams, the coaching staff's in disarray right before the fucking season. I mean, it's just
crazy.
Brutal timing. So definitely those are negative situations whenever you see them. Definitely not what I would consider bet on scenario. Not by any stretch of the imagination. All right. My best bet for this card, you know what it is? It's more, let's see what's still available at a decent number. I'm going to go with Towson here. Towson, minus 110 is what I got on the money line. It's still at a good enough price right now in this game against Greensboro. I think it's moving in the right direction. I like what I've seen out of this team. Their defense has been terrific, and I think they can grind their way to a road victory. Defense travels, and we saw that against UMass. They shut down the Minutemen at the defensive end of the court in that game. Towson on the money line, best price is minus 130 right now. That's what we'll go with here. Towson minus 130 against NC Greensboro. That is going to be my best bet for this Thursday college basketball.
Real quick,
show.
I forgot, Ian. We didn't touch on this game. Just because it's in Utah's at home, I want to take Sam Houston. I just don't know if I can pull the trigger. We didn't get to that game. So it's just a lean. I don't know if I bet it. I still might. I kind of lean into the 10 with them.
Yeah, I mean, with them, they were a weird team last year where I try to bet them over, and they would struggle to score the basketball, and it frustrated the hell out of me. Utah sometimes can be tough in that home court of theirs, but I need to see a little bit more from them. Last year was a bit of a lean year for them overall when you look at the way they played. I think this is supposed to be, on paper, a little bit of a better season for them, no question about that. And we'll see how they fare here in this matchup here tonight against Sam Houston. But interesting team. And keep in mind, Craig Smith now the head coach there of that Utah basketball team, and he's a pretty good head coach. So I think he's the right guy to maybe get that Utes program up the pecking order, if you will, in the Pac-12.
They got the big guy. Is it Chambers, right? Because he's got a brother, I think's his name. Yeah, he's their go-to guy, yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But yeah, no play on that one. Same with Utah State, San Diego. I mean, Utah State's getting the money. They're really good, but I don't know if I want to lay that much on the road against the Toreros. But there you go.
Yeah, that line's shrinking real quick. They're taking it. They've been so good. Torero's middle of the pack team. Yeah, that one's a tough one. I agree.
That is, but Utah State, at least early in the season, betting market's paying attention to them looking pretty damn solid here early on. All right, speaking of solid, this show is solid. The chat is solid. The participation from all of you in the chat is solid every single day. Hit the like button. Conor, Mac, and I will be back with you tomorrow, same time, 5 p.m. Eastern, for the final show of the week for Net Profit College Basketball. And then we're back on Saturday as well, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, College Football Pub Hub. I think the whole crew is going to be back. Big Ragu's already telling me he's feeling better. He'll be ready to go Saturday. DJ Big Boss, he was on the show with Jimmy today, so I think he's on the mend, and he'll be ready to go for Saturday morning as well. So I think the whole crew, the whole band is going to be back together again on Saturday morning for the College Football Pub Up show. So definitely looking forward to that. That's a wrap. Thanks to everyone in the chat. Enjoy the games and good luck tonight. For Conor, Mac, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great Thursday night. Enjoy the games and good luck. We'll see you again tomorrow on Friday for another edition of the College Basketball Net Profit Show right here on Pub Sports Radio.